to the Healing Trauma Through Conscious Embodiment Summit, revealing your body's wisdom and utilizing creativity in healing. My name is Greg Westwood, and I'm your host. My work, Depth Integration, integrates meditation, breath work, inquiry, journey work, and movement as conscious embodiment tools for healing. The purpose of this summit is to support participants who are searching for that deeper and longer lasting healing that conscious embodiment tools provide. My intention is to educate, motivate, and inspire each of us into taking empowered steps in our healing journeys and in remembering who we truly are. I'm so honored to introduce my next guest, Dr. Andrea Pennington. Dr. Pennington is a Black American integrative physician, meditation teacher, and psychedelic integration mentor. She is the best-selling author of The Top 10 Traits of Highly Resilient People, The Orgasm Prescription for Women, and the Real Self Love Handbook. She is the founder of the online holistic platform, Innate Vitality, which integrates ancient wisdom with modern science and media. Her topic today is using meditation and life writing to heal the inner child and embody a new you. Dr. Pennington, it's such a pleasure to meet you. And I'm so thankful that you're joining us here today.
Thank you for having me, Greg. It's an honor. Thank you. So I'm really grateful that you're hosting this summit, because for me, the embodiment piece is often what I have to infuse into people that they miss from either their traditional psychotherapy practice or psychedelics. And I just think it's wonderful that you're hosting this summit and that I can share another way that we can use creativity to access the body's wisdom and really do this deep healing work.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you and your perspective featured here. So you talk about a link between early developmental and stress and childhood traumas that then become adult illnesses and diseases. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Absolutely. So what we know now is if you experienced what are known as adverse childhood experiences before the age of 18, you have a greater likelihood of experiencing physical or emotional challenges as an adult. And that includes behavioral challenges. And I say that we're just now knowing this. The reality is the big ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences study, was published when I finished medical school back in 1998. And now that this information is starting to percolate throughout the world, people are being tuned in to actually take the ACE quiz, if you will. It's a little short free questionnaire that will tell you what your ACE score is. And if your ACE score is 3 or more, then you know that you're more likely to experience some of these challenges. And that's a wide-ranging number of things, from allergies, asthma, Alzheimer's, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and of course, substance use disorder, eating disorders, and other acting out behaviors. And this is really important because for me as a physician, early in my career, I started working with people who had binge eating disorder or substance use disorder. And of course, when you get trauma trained and you're working with addiction recovery, we always go back to the childhood to understand what was that original wounding. But what we know now is that some people are walking around with complex PTSD, never having been diagnosed, so to speak, with a big T trauma. Right? So of course, someone would remember if they experienced sexual abuse or neglect or physical abuse, or they witnessed something. But what we now know is that just family dysfunction, like having a parent who was either dead or in prison or had a drastic illness, we know that enduring a pandemic could raise your ACE score. And what that tells us is that many people today who are suffering with anxiety or depression or just feeling like they're stuck in a rut, they may have clues to what will fix them. And this is important for me because in my medical practice, I, as an acupuncturist as well, brought in all these holistic modalities. And I found that people would see so many different practitioners and try so many different things. And when we really dig deep, that was when we were starting to find that people would truly thrive and be well. And that is important for us because you can have an intellectual understanding of your trauma. You can look at the timeline of your life. You can even look at the family history and understand, oh, that's why I'm that way. But an intellectual understanding isn't enough
Right.
for you to shift your identity and to become who you really are and to embody that healing. So you know this because you're bringing these practices to your clients and into the summit. But it's helpful for people to hear it from all these different perspectives, because if you find that you're doing talk therapy and you're just blocked, sometimes we need to be a little more creative in getting at the root cause and starting to integrate it. Does that make sense?
Definitely. You're speaking to me for sure.
Right. So one of the techniques that turned out to be really pivotal was adding in meditation and journaling. So for me, when clients would come into the practice, everyone would get auricular acupuncture, that's ear acupuncture, which is known to help calm the body and the brain and help people open up before they go into group therapy or before they go into one-on-one therapy. And oftentimes when people get into this deep meditative state, they're having insights and downloads. And that's great when you're sitting in group therapy or one-on-one. And then I would tell them, go home this evening and write about it, write about whatever came up. And then I stumbled across the work of James Pennebaker, who over the last 25 years has really inspired many people to do this journaling, or what is called narrative therapy. And one of the most striking things that happened before I moved here to the south of France, where I now live, just as I was leaving the United States, I was contacted by someone who said, listen, my kids have just been through the most horrendous traumatic experience. I want to bring them to you. And I was like, I'm really sorry, but I'm actually leaving for France. And I said, the one thing I can say that you could do right now is to have them start journaling about what happened. Of course, they were able to talk to a counselor and they had their dad. But adding on this practice, just a few weeks later, I got a message from him saying, thank you. You have no idea how much this has shifted things for my daughter. And to this day, I still get messages and him singing my praises. And it really inspired me because I thought, if we allow ourselves to get into a quieted state of mind, we can have access to the subconscious mind. So all of our fears, our doubts, memories of the trauma. And it's great if you can process it with someone, but there's something about physically writing. As you know, you're getting into the body.
It's a body, yeah.
Exactly. And it allows people to bring up this material and start to process it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think a lot of people don't realize how much of an embodied practice journaling is and how it moves it into the paper from your body. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you've had some childhood experiences that led you to anxiety, perfectionism, and people pleasing, and ultimately to burnout. Now you help other people recover from that. Can you talk a little bit about that, your personal experience?
Yes. I'm really grateful to my patients because I didn't have any problem with addiction. I didn't have an eating disorder. But as I was sitting with patients and hearing what was underlying their compulsive behaviors, I heard that they didn't feel good enough. And I heard that they didn't feel worthy of happiness and that they didn't love themselves. And I don't know if you've ever had this where someone says something and it's not the exact same story, but it creates this feeling of resonance in you. It just strikes a chord. And I was like, oh my God, I have some of that. And it helped me just to understand that, yeah, all these compulsive behaviors, like for me, my compulsive behavior was always seeking validation or always looking to prove myself. And on the perfectionist front, I would tweak presentations and everything to the nth degree. I would stay up late, always studying and trying to learn as much as I possibly could. And as I started to unravel this, I realized, oh my goodness, I have these same programs in my subconscious mind. And that is what is leading to this anxiety and this imposter syndrome, like never feeling like I'm good enough, totally afraid that someone's going to find out that I'm not smart enough, that I'm not prepared enough, or whatever. And for me, it also kind of prompted me to look at, well, why? If I didn't have some of these serious traumas like they did, why am I like I am? And that's when I discovered all of this information about living in a dysfunctional family. And again, there I was thinking, but dysfunction? Well, sure, my parents were divorced. I was a latchkey kid, but I knew half of my neighborhood, half of the people I rode on the bus to school with were living the same things. So what I realized is that we had normalized the toxicity and the dysfunction.
Yeah.
And when I started to investigate more and I talked to my family members, I'm the youngest in the family. And I learned so much about what family life was like when I was a baby. And Greg, it literally wasn't until I was 49 or 50 that I discovered that I had endured so much toxicity and stress that I took on a whole lot of other parts that suppressed my authentic self. And I had to do the same process that all of my patients had to do to unburden and unlearn that conditioning.
Yeah. And they benefited so much from you doing that, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
What is the holistic healing framework, and how do you help people build resilience, heal from their traumas and nurture real self-love?
The holistic framework I use is called the Cornerstone process. And it's a process for developing self-love. For me, self-love or real self-love is the cornerstone for all healing. And this 5-step process really evolved in the practice of medicine as I watched what people were doing to heal, the people who were most resilient or even bounced forward with post-traumatic growth. They all seem to go through these 5 stages. And I started to speak about it. I was speaking on TV and on stages and got this download that I needed to share this. And so the Cornerstone process leads people through 1, awareness, like becoming aware of just the level of toxicity or trauma you've endured, putting a name on it, looking at the family history and identifying where you were impacted, how you got programmed, how you might not be living your true self. And then through a variety of exercises, they get to step 2, which is acceptance. When I really looked at the patients who recovered and thrived, they got to a point where they were able to say, yes, the past was horrible, especially if they were victims of abuse. But once they were really able to accept that the past is the past and now is now, that was when they were able to have compassion for themselves, forgiveness for themselves, for some of the damage they've caused. For some of them, forgiveness for the people who harmed them in the past. And then that positioned them to be ready to move on to step 3, which is accountability. And that's a major turning point, especially in the embodiment, because rather than being at the effect of everything, where life is happening to you, where you're a victim, when you move into accountability, you say, from this day forward, I take full responsibility for who I am, for how I show up in the world, and for what I do going forward. And that's when people really can start to feel a shift, like I'm, for once, I am the agent of my life. I am the sovereign, the ruler of who I am, or the author of my story. And then we move into step 4, which is inspired action. So for any of us who've ever been reactionary or compulsive, we've got these pre-programmed behaviors and emotional reactions that just come almost automatically when we're triggered or stressed. What we invited people to do was look at taking a pause and saying, what inspired action can I take in my life moving forward? And this is about aligning your action with your values and with your vision for who you want to be. So if you're no longer blaming yourself or others for the past, you're taking accountability, then you can start to say, well, what do I want my life to look like if I get to be the conscious agent? And then we move into step 5, which is appreciation. As you know, the more time we spend in positive emotion, especially if it is consciously chosen, we know that that broadens and builds our array of resources and resilience. And so this holistic framework has helped people, whether they're recovering from physical illness, addiction, or just burnout. This helps them have like clear away the clutter and have a directionality to the healing process.
Sounds like a wonderful framework. And you also work with sacred plant medicine, right?
Yes.
How does that address trauma in the people that you work with?
Well, working with sacred plant medicines like ayahuasca and fungal medicine like psilocybin mushrooms helps people let go of the ego defenses that have been typically protecting us, helping us fit in and survive. When you go into a psychedelic ceremony, of course, there are other substances as well that are laboratory made. They're not from plants like MDMA and LSD and ketamine. But when you go into one of these ceremonies and you get into a safe space, preferably with a facilitator or a guide, you're able to let down your guard and you get this access to the subconscious, sometimes quite visually with, hallucinations, visions, sensations. But most importantly, people tend to come away with dramatic insights. They see the past from a different perspective. Then there's this kind of separation of the victim identity or any identity they've taken on, and they become the witness to their life. The consciousness that animates the body, they're starting to recognize. And so I find that with psychedelic integration, we have the opportunity, doesn't happen for everyone, but we have the opportunity for accelerated healing of trauma. And this is what happened in my case, healing from the trauma of my childhood, especially the stuff that had been repressed and denied and forgotten. And a lot of the abuse that I particularly endured was pre-verbal. So I didn't even have sort of words to put on what I was feeling or what I was experiencing, which I now know was complex PTSD symptoms. So my own healing journey using psychedelic assisted therapy and sacred plant medicine ceremonies inspired me to get certified through IPI and MAPS, which is the Multidiscipline Association for Psychedelic Studies, to be able to legally facilitate these types of ceremonies and group sessions. And I think that for people who have been stuck in trauma loops, of course, if they qualify medically and psychologically, because these are potent medicines and tools that can reveal a lot, and you need to be cleared for it. I think it can help a lot of people who have had treatment-resistant depression and suicidality and the types of racial-based trauma that get passed down through generations, and we don't have any really good framework to address them.
Yeah. You talk about how a lot of your trauma was pre-verbal. How do you, what are some of your best hints for people working with their inner child and how they can be healing towards him or her and then move into embodying their new self? Is that too much of a question?
No, I think it's a perfect question.
Okay.
So, for me, for example, I'll use myself as a case study. One of my earliest memories was being spanked for wetting the bed, and I was only 1 year old.
Oof.
Now, I didn't have words for that, but by going through a guided meditation practice and calling forth my inner child, I was shown a scene. And this was even before any psychedelics. I literally did some breath work and did a guided meditation, which I offer to your viewing audience. And I saw this scene of little baby Dre hiding behind some curtains. And with a practice that we do that is very much like internal family systems, where you're contacting a part. In this case, it was an inner toddler that I brought into a safe space, literally held her in my arms and started to have a dialogue, allowed her to share. And for me, it wasn't actually words. I just allowed her to emote. And I was able to pick up on the fear and the terror and the sadness and the longing for love. And being able to feel that and acknowledge it consciously helped to unburden some of what she had been carrying. And that kind of practice allowed me to then do some of the life writing, the journaling, to understand more about the patterns that I took on as a result of what I endured as a child. But that's just one example. There are other times when I've contacted other parts of me, but that process is incredibly powerful. And it sounds simplistic to the intellectual mind, because a lot of people will say, well, oh, I know I was abused and I know who did it. I already have that intellectual understanding. But when you get into a deep meditative state, you're into alpha and theta waves where you've got access to the body and access to the subconscious mind. You have the ability to start changing the beliefs and the programs that younger version of you held. So we're literally rewriting the narrative. So in my case, I explained to her, Dad and Mom got it wrong. They were wrong for what they did. I know they may have had their beliefs, and younger Dre was like, of course, Mommy and Daddy are God when you're a baby. It's like everything that they say must be what I need to do. But I could see how the experiences in my childhood primed me to be the good girl, to be the perfectionist. Like I had to get everything right to avoid punishment. And I saw that was how I took on these beliefs, that if I'm not doing something good outwardly, then I'm not worthy of love, which persisted until my 30s. So by being able to go in and have this experience and then pull her into my arms and say, what do you really want? What do you want that you didn't get in the past? And what do you want from me now? I was able to give her that felt sense of safety and compassion and connection. And then in most cases, I invite my clients, and I did this myself, to say to that young child, now, what would you like for me to do that's our special thing? So that she could start to feel trust that I can be the inner loving parent. I'm the now responsible adult. And when we can do that for the inner child, then it makes it easier to work with these other parts, these protector parts, like my perfectionistic part that felt like no, I have to do everything right. So I'm guessing that you know a little bit about IFS, or a lot about IFS. So this makes sense to you. But for me, it was because I'm a physician. I started doing therapy and training after my patients nudged me in that direction. And so as a physician, when I have people coming in who are not only dealing with addictions, but they've got chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, they've got these other diagnoses that are kind of slippery. There's not like a perfect pinpoint etiology or cause. Many of these processes help them uncover what primed the nervous system and the immune system to be hyperactive. And it's incredibly healing, because that's when you bring in the body.
So thank you for sharing that beautiful example of how we can reparent our inner child and give them what they didn't have initially, and then expand and transform our lives. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this beautiful presentation?
Well, just maybe one reminder that no matter what the circumstances of your birth or what led to your birth, you are a precious soul, and you have a right to live and thrive, healthy and free. And even though you may have adopted certain behaviors and coping strategies and emotional reactions, that part of you that is pure and perfect and whole is still there. And you can reclaim that sense of vitality and heal. So I would just say, don't give up hope.
Thank you so much for those inspiring words. So we'll have a link to your website so people can learn more about your wonderful work and how you work with your patients. And and you're generously gifting something to people who sign up for your mailing list. Would you like to talk about that for a second?
Yes, I call it the 3 keys to becoming the hero of your life. So narrative therapy is also about getting in touch with archetypes. We've talked about a couple of them here, the victim archetype, the inner child. There's also sort of the golden child or the pure child, and the inner parent or a divine mother, divine father. In this masterclass and life writing program, I've included guided meditations and a timeline of life events worksheet to help you go through the same cornerstone process to heal the inner child and activate your inner hero so that you can become the author of your life moving forward.
Sounds very generous and so helpful to everyone. I just can't thank you enough for spending this time with me, Dr. Pennington. It was just a beautiful experience listening to your personal sharing and your words of wisdom, and that we worked it out with you living in France and me here in Colorado.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
yeah, it's such an honor. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Sure. Thank you so much for watching, and please tune in to the other wonderful presenters we have here at the Healing Trauma Through Conscious Embodiment Summit. Take care.